we're going to start with Notre Dame. You have anything on them?
Yeah, I mean, we hinted at it a little bit last week. They play one of the hardest schedules in football.
Yeah.
At least top-heavy wise. They play, and we were laughing last night because it's kind of nuts. They play the odds favorites to win 3 conferences. That's kind of odd, no?
Yeah, well, before we get into their schedule, I do want to get into all that and talk about, how they potentially could be a better team than they were last year.
Yeah.
Absolutely should be a better team than they were last year, but could have a worse record when you look at it, when you look at their schedule and the games they play and all that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Before we get into all that, let's just kind of touch on them and their roster and all that.
Yeah, so, obviously the biggest addition here is going to be Sam Hartman. We both love Sam Hartman.
Yeah.
We think he's great. Yeah, that offense took a huge step up for sure. As far as them being better, right, I think there's a shot. They're going to have a really good defense. The key for Sam Hartman, though, is the offensive line. That offensive line is super experienced. They probably have the best offensive lineman in the country, Joe Alt. Preseason All-American, preseason everything else award.
So.
Yeah. And so he's legit.
Yeah, and you look at this team last year. If you just started watching college football in September when week 1 started, and then you kind of tuned out 4 or 5 weeks in, you probably have the idea that Notre Dame sucked last year because they started off really poorly. But they were 1 win away from being a 10-win football team last year, and they dropped the game to Marshall, and they lost games here and there that they absolutely shouldn't have.
Right.
But they found a win over Clemson late in the year.
Yeah.
So this is a team that showed you really high highs and really low lows last year. So you bring in those guys. You put Sam Hartman behind Joe Alt, like you were saying. You let Marcus Freeman settle into his second year in Notre Dame. This could be trouble. I know they're not in a conference specifically, so it wouldn't be trouble for any conference in particular.
Right?
But given the teams they play, this is going to be a bad matchup for a lot of people.
Yeah, and their strength of schedule is so nice that they don't really need to be in a conference. They end up winning 11 games. Well, there's a conversation to be had because of their strength of schedule.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. Definitely a season ruiner potential.
Yeah, and so you said if they win 11 games, there's a conversation to be had. I assume you're talking about playoff.
Yeah.
It would depend on where the losses came or who the loss came to.
Yeah.
Look, if they win 11 games and they go 11-1, it's going to be really hard to keep them out the playoff.
Yeah,
because
that loss is probably at that point I'd assume be to a conference champion at that point.
Yeah.
If they were going to drop a game, it would be to a undefeated Clemson or something like that.
Well, and look, here's the thing. If they only lose one game, I imagine it would be to one of USC, Ohio State, or Clemson.
Right.
And if it's not to one of those, they're in because they have those 3 wins.
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at? So I think you're right. If they go 11-1, they're in the college football playoffs simply because of strength of schedule.
Yeah, I agree.
Now I don't know if they'll do that, but let's get into the schedule.
Yeah. So it starts off decently, right? They get Navy, win, right? They get Tennessee State,
Win.
Yeah, I'm playing. NC State, they go to NC State. I think that's easy win.
Yes,
I don't know about easy,
I think they win. I'm not going to call it an easy win. It's certainly a step up from Navy and Tennessee State.
For sure. And then they get Central Michigan at home. I'm sorry.
Win.
Yeah.
Okay,
win.
so they start out 4-0 with NC State being the only, decently tough game in there. There's 3 guaranteed wins. I'm gonna call the NC State game a guaranteed win, but who knows? Judging by last year, anything really can happen with this team.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, then in week 5, or their 5th game of the year at least, they play Ohio State at home.
Yeah.
I know we covered Ohio
State.
Yeah, we covered Ohio State already. You and I both took Ohio State to win that game.
Yeah.
But since we're talking Notre Dame, let's break it down again.
Yeah, so the key is the offenses. I think Notre Dame's going to have a good offense, but I don't think they can score enough points to compete with Ohio State.
I think, and you and I really liked the addition of Sam Hartman, but what we liked so much about Sam Hartman at Wake Forest was his ability to sling it. We loved the system he was in with that long delayed mesh. It allowed him to make a lot of decisions in a short amount of time and see the field in its entirety. I think at Notre Dame, you step into a much more run-heavy offense under Marcus Freeman, and it's going to require him to play a little bit of a different game.
Which I'm sure he'll adapt to.
And I still think he's a great quarterback, and if I'm Notre Dame, I'm ecstatic about having him in the backfield. But if I'm Sam Hartman, I'm thinking, obviously he chose to commit there. He knew what he was getting into, but I think he's going to have to adapt, and he's going to have to play a little different game than he was playing at Wake Forest.
I agree. Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what we get.
Me too.
And given the matchup, I look at Ohio State's receiver room, it's better. I look at Ohio State's defense, I think it's better. Now the defenses are much closer than the offenses, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily see. I don't see one point of either team. I don't see one position group on Notre Dame's team where I'm like, they have Ohio State beat there.
Yeah, I mean, even at the running back. I mean, I think the offensive line is better.
Yes, there's an argument for the offensive line, absolutely.
Now, granted, but I still think Ohio State has a better run game. I think that because their running back is that much better. Javion Henderson's legit. So
and Notre Dame lost Logan Diggs. Now, obviously, they have other guys, and you don't just get guys transferring out that are going to be the starters. So, but they lost depth, if nothing else.
Yeah, I have Ohio State beating them. We already covered it, but
I do too. But I will say this, and I said it in the Ohio State segment when we covered them. I think this is going to be a really, really good game. Even last year, in Marcus Freeman's first game as the head coach at Notre Dame, they lost that game 21-10, but I believe they were winning at halftime. Yeah. So, am I right about that?
I'm pretty sure.
I think it was 10-7 at half.
I think so. Look at the box score.
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was. I can't remember. I don't want to definitively make that statement.
It was either that game. No, because Northwestern they were up.
Notre Dame, Ohio State last year. It was game 1.
Box score.
Yeah, look up the box score.
Regardless, so how do you have this game going points wise? To me, it's a high scoring affair.
Really? Okay, so I think the opposite. I think the highest we'll see is 28.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn, yeah, no.
Which is still 4 scores.
Right.
But what you got?
Yeah, it was 10-7 going into half.
There you go.
And who was up? Notre Dame?
Yeah, Notre Dame.
Yeah, okay. So there you go. Okay, so we both have them 4-1 after Ohio State. Then they go 2 Duke and 2 Louisville. So a two little, away game stretch here.
Yeah, I mean, I got them beating both of these teams, but these are not, crappy opponents.
No.
Right? Like, this is not something you can just, like, all right, we're done with Ohio State. Like, let's go take these 2 games. Like, these are legit teams.
Especially following Ohio State like this. Let's see here. Yeah, so
especially coming off of a loss, at least predicted from us.
Yeah, so coming off a loss, I think there's a little bit, barring injury and all that kind of stuff, I think there's a little bit of, okay, let's get back into shape. We're not in the conference. We can't really afford to lose a bunch of games.
Right.
Let's go handle business. Coming off a win, there could be a little bit of a hangover because, Duke doesn't have top half odds to win the ACC. I think they're a good team. I really do think they're a decent team. I think coming off a win over Ohio State, obviously that is huge for their strength of schedule, strength of record, all that kind of stuff. But there could potentially be a little hangover right here in this Duke game because Ohio State, again, betting odds to win the Big Ten, and then Louisville, the week right after Duke, is third in odds to win the ACC. So that's scheduled right between 2. And Louisville's not a sexy name when talking college football, at least not as of late since Lamar Jackson, really. But
and even then, they were 9-3.
But Louisville's a sneaky good team this year. Obviously, look, I'm going to take Notre Dame to beat Duke, but I think that's a game to watch, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So we have
Louisville as well.
Yeah, we have them 5-1 going to Louisville. I'm going to take Notre Dame again, but I think this one's more of a coin flip than anything.
Really? Yeah, I'm going to take Notre Dame pretty convincingly.
When you say pretty convincingly,
I mean like 7-14. I'm not talking about
7-14 points. Okay,
yeah.
So I'm not too far off from you there. I think if it's closer to 14, it'll be a late score.
Yeah,
I think this game is going to be one possession most of the game.
I get that. I can see that too.
And then they get USC at home.
Yeah. I'm going to take USC in this one.
And really for Notre Dame, this is kind of a make or break game because it is early in the season. I know you're talking about Game 7, Game 8, somewhere in there, but it's mid-October. We're not even into the swing of November yet to close out the season. October 14th, they get USC at home. If we're right, they have at least one loss at this point. Make or break. You're not in a conference. You can't afford to lose 2 games and go win a conference championship. You're going to be sitting at home that week, conference championship week. You cannot afford to lose more than – you can't afford to lose this game, especially with Clemson coming up.
And a prior loss, in our opinion, to Ohio State,
Now, we've already talked about USC, and we've already broken this game down.
Yeah.
I took Notre Dame to win it.
Right.
You?
No, I got USC in this one.
Okay. You think it's just Caleb Williams? Caleb Williams is going to throw the ball all over the field?
Yeah. It's tough to keep up. Like a team like Notre Dame with that offense, like it's going to be tough to keep up with the Ohio States, with the USCs, I know they don't play Tennessee, but teams like that just score and score and score and score. Like that's not how Notre Dame wants to play ball.
Yeah.
So
this is for USC. So Notre Dame has their bye week late in the year. USC has it earlier in the year. So this opens up the first of the last 6 games. So this is the first game of the back half of USC's schedule for them. They're very likely going to start out 6-0, and I think up until that point, and I've talked about it in the USC segment, they're going to look like they have a really great defense, and Notre Dame's going to expose that a little bit. And it's the first of a really, really brutal stretch. In those 6 games, USC's got to play Notre Dame, Washington, Oregon. Lots of just really good. Utah's in there. So that's a tough stretch for them. I think it's going to be a little bit of a rude awakening coming off the slow start in terms of opponents and matchups.
I could see that, but to me, this is I agree, but in a different way. Like for them, this is going to be their statement game. This is going to be a must-win. All right, guys, we won the 6 games, so we thought we won. If we beat Notre Dame right here, like, we're legit. Let's keep the momentum going, that kind of thing. And again, coming off a bye with Lincoln Riley, like, that's tough to beat.
I think Notre Dame is just going to be more I think they're going to be a more disciplined team. They're going to be more sound in the trenches than USC will.
Right.
Obviously, USC is going to have the talent advantage in the skill positions.
Right.
Of course they are. But I think when you look at the way that game plays, I think Notre Dame's going to control it. They're going to have the ball probably 8 to 10 minutes more than USC.
Right.
So if USC is going to win this game, it's going to be behind Caleb Williams, and he's going to have the best game of his season.
No, that's the guy I want to be behind.
No
right?
doubt. No
So,
doubt. You couldn't pick a better guy to be behind.
Yeah, that's the.
But I just think the way this game falls on USC's schedule, paired with the discipline of Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman settling in, an experienced senior like Sam Hartman, taking over at quarterback, I think this game just plays to Notre Dame.
You keep aiding to the fact that they're coming off a bye. Like, if I'm going to play my hardest opponent on my schedule, and this is not USC's hardest opponent.
They're not coming off a bye. I said they had the bye earlier in their season.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I like USC. We talked about it before. Again, to me, Notre Dame doesn't want to play a high-scoring affair, and that's the ball you have. Like Clemson, for example, and we'll get there. You don't have to play a high-scoring game with Clemson. Mm-hmm. It's a different kind of football game. I'm not saying Clemson is not as good as Ohio State and USC. I'm just saying it's a different type of football that they play.
Yeah, no doubt.
Whereas with USC and Ohio State, you got to keep up, and if you can't keep up, bad things happen.
And so we're looking at this game differently because you keep saying you think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. Yeah. I don't think so.
USC,
I think the highest score we'll see in this game is somewhere between 28 and 35.
Yeah.
And the reason being is I just don't think Caleb Williams is going to have the ball in his hands much.
Right.
And so if that plays, if that turns out to be the case, I think it'd be wild to pick USC in that scenario. Now, if it does end up being a shootout, Notre Dame's not going to win a shootout with USC.
Right, exactly.
So I think just looking at I think our biggest fundamental difference in this game is the way it plays, not necessarily the winner. Right? Because if it plays the way I'm expecting, you would take Notre Dame.
Probably so, yeah.
And if it plays the way you were expecting, I would take USC.
Right.
But
nonetheless,
I do think Notre Dame wins this game.
I got you. Yeah, I'm taking USC.
Cool. All right, then they get Pitt at home.
Yeah, I'm going to take Notre Dame in this one.
I am as well. I don't feel like we need to cover that one too much. We're getting to some better games.
Right.
Then they go to Clemson on November 4th. November 4th is a stacked Saturday. I don't know where College Game Day is going to go that day.
It ain't going there.
It very well could.
Not there. But, yeah, so I this is tough, man. I got Notre Dame beating Clemson. We had talked about it before. And, again, it's because I think it's hard to beat Notre Dame at their own game. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. It's just like USC. It's hard to beat USC at their own game. You're not – like, you'd have to score 50. Right? It's kind of the same thing with Notre Dame and Clemson. We saw it last year. I think they do it again.
I think the way the game played last year was a little bit of a I don't want to say it was a fluke because Notre Dame ended up being a good team, but I think Notre Dame really shocked everyone with how that game played.
Shocked themselves.
They shocked themselves. I think they took Clemson a little bit by surprise. I think Clemson's not going to have the luxury of overlooking Notre Dame this year.
Right.
And, looking at that defensive unit, the D-line, you bring in a guy, Cade Klubnik at quarterback, not bring in, but he's going to be the starter from day one. Will Shipley at running back. I think the offensive line, again, this is just a situation where you look at two very similar teams and one that's got more power on it.
Right.
I know you're taking Notre Dame. I think I'm going to have to take Clemson to win a close one.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's going to be close. Again, this is the game that I'm not suspecting to be a high-scoring game.
Yeah.
This is the one that I'm looking at, a 21-14 or 21-17. Although last year was 35-14. Clemson got beat down, like bad. And it was like, we always talk about it. It was really like 35-7. Like, they got beat bad. I don't think it'll be that bad this year. I don't think it'll be that high scoring this year. But I could see like a 21-17 Notre Dame victory.
I also think that if Clemson has the same issues at this point in the season that they were having at that point in the season last year in terms of
that'd be a problem.
cohesion between the quarterback and the rest of the offense and understanding of the play calling situation and all that. If Clemson's in that same scenario by November 4th this year, then we're looking at Clemson a whole lot differently than we are right now.
Brother, yeah. I mean, yeah, no doubt. And we were watching it like last year at the beginning of Clemson season. They were, just in shambles.
Yeah.
They couldn't figure out what the hell to do. They ran a quarterback run like 7 times or 8 times. It might have been more than that in a row
Against Syracuse.
Yeah, we were like, what the hell is going on?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, if that's the crap that they're doing to start the season, yeesh, I don't know.
And when
I might, definitely take Notre Dame.
And you add a guy like Garrett Riley to Clemson's offensive, room, and,
That helps.
he's going to be the one drawing up the schemes and the plays and all that. I don't know, man. I think this is just a game. I don't think it's crazy for you to think Notre Dame can go in and win this game. I think that's absolutely achievable for them. But just in terms of the matchup, I have to go Clemson.
I got you. And that's the thing, Joe. I'm just not a huge Clemson guy. We talked about that on the Clemson.
That's so weird. You were last year.
Yeah, I thought I was just a lower on DJ. I was just lower on DJ than I was on.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. Well, at this point, I have Notre Dame 8-2. They get Wake Forest at home, and then they go to Stanford.
Well. Yeah, so Wake Forest is definitely gonna be an interesting one. I mean, obviously, it's Wake Forest going to Notre Dame. Sam Hartman gets to play his former team. I'm gonna take Notre Dame. Sam Hartman was Wake Forest last year for a lot of it, right? A quarterback like that in the ACC usually does big things. I'm very anxious to see what Wake Forest does this year, but I'm taking Notre Dame by a decent margin.
Me too. I'm also going to take Notre Dame, and I'm going to take Notre Dame against Stanford as well.
Yeah, that's one of the worst teams in college football.
So we put them. We agree on the record. We both think they go 10-2.
10-2, yeah.
We just have a couple different losses in there. Now this is a tricky scenario. So before we got into the schedule breakdown,
right?
You said if they go 11-1, they're in the playoff, and I tend to agree with you.
Right.
Now we look at 10-2, and they only won one of those 3 games. That's the hardest matchups on their schedule. What do they look like in the playoff conversation now?
Nothing, absolutely nothing, because they can't play for a conference championship. If you're sitting at home on conference championship weekend, you have to be a one-loss team.
And I commend them.
With Ohio State last year.
And I commend them for scheduling the way they did.
Yeah,
and putting these difficult opponents on there. I mean, literally playing the betting odds to win 3 separate conferences is crazy. I know the argument about Notre Dame is always, well, they don't play anybody. They're not in a conference. They don't play a conference schedule, all that kind of stuff. While that's true, and they don't play as many, difficult games as teams that are mid-tier in their own conference will play. Playing the betting odds to win 3 separate conferences is ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I'd venture to say nobody's ever done that because you rarely just pull from conferences like that.
Yeah.
So
I understand in years past saying Notre Dame doesn't play anybody. They have an easy schedule, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. They play USC every year. And this year, that's out the window. Yeah. I don't want to hear that from anybody.
Yeah, they play a really good schedule.
Yeah. Okay, so I think they beat Ohio. I think they beat USC. I'm sorry. I think they lose to Ohio State and they lose to Clemson, but beat USC. In that scenario, I think USC is probably the second in terms of, if I were to rate those if I was to power rate those 3 teams, I think USC would be 2. Yeah, behind Ohio State, ahead of Clemson.
I agree.
This is really tricky, though, because the Pac-12 has the potential to just eat itself in terms of everybody's just going to beat each other up over there. At least that's what we predicted.
Yeah, but a 10-2 Pac-12 champion is going to go.
Yeah.
One-loss ACC championship's going to go. And we also forgot about, the best 2 conferences of football. You're going to have at least one representative from the SEC. Either Ohio State or Michigan's going to go. That's your 4 teams.
Yeah.
Unless you're 11-1.
Yeah.
Unless if you're 12-0, but I think we're taking that off the table.
I think Notre Dame would be right out. They'd be right outside. I think they.
Hey, that's New Year's 6.
With the graphic, the way the College Football Playoff Committee does the graphic, they do the top 4 and then randomly show 2 that don't go. Yeah. They show 5 and 6. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
But I think Notre Dame would find themselves somewhere in that 5-6 range.
I agree. Yeah, I think. No, I disagree. I think you're gonna have more people that are 11-1 and don't go.
Potentially.
I think you're 7-8, and again, I think you get New Year's 6, but That's what 10-2 gets you when you're not a conference anything. When you don't play for a conference championship.
Potentially. I don't know. I think they're going to be a really, really good team. They're going to finish the season top 10, get a New Year's Six bowl, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I commend them for scheduling the way they did, but I think there's 2 games on there that are just going to keep them out of the playoff.
Agreed. Yep.